Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the monthly Strengthening Families Networking webinar. Today we are talking about the Head Start Parent, Family, and Community Engagement Framework for programs and systems, learning about a revision to it that just came out and how it applies not just to Head Start programs anymore, but to other childcare and to systems. So thanks to everyone for joining us. We're going to jump right in so that we can make the most of the hour we have together. I'm going to give some brief updates from the Center for the Study of Social Policy, and then we will get into our topic with our guest presenter, Anna Lovejoy. So just a quick reminder, and for anyone who's new with us, these webinars are an open invitation to anyone who's using the Strengthening Families Protective Factors Framework or coordinating Strengthening Families efforts, whether that's for your program or your community or your state. We convene these together with my organization, the Center for the Study of Social Policy, and our partners at the National Alliance of Children's Trust and Prevention Funds. Each month we have a topic, usually with a guest speaker, sometimes with a panel, and we post the recordings and materials on a Google site that is maintained by the Alliance. So within a few days after the webinar, things will be posted there. You'll also get a follow-up email anytime you register for the webinar that includes a link to the recording within GoToWebinar or and a link to this Google site where we also have the materials, and it's a little bit more user-friendly than just getting the recording. So we do this the second Thursday of each month from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock Eastern Time. In December, that'll be on the 13th, and we're going to hear from our partners at 0 to 3 about building protective factors with military families. They've got some great new resources, and they may be useful to you if you work with military families, if you live near a military installation, or just out of curiosity to know how some of the issues are different for military families and how we can still take a protective factors approach. We'll continue with the second Thursday of each month into 2019, so go ahead and mark your calendar and we'll announce the topics as they get closer. You can always contact me to suggest a topic or to volunteer to share something about your work on an upcoming webinar. So just think if there's a topic that you would like to hear more about, we can always try to work it into the schedule. All right, a couple updates. I wanted to thank everyone who came to the Together for Families conference, which was a big success in October. It feels like more than a month ago, but it was really just about 3.5 weeks ago. Many of us were together in Cleveland, so thanks to everyone who presented and who submitted proposals for presentations. We had a really strong Strengthening Families track. The family support track was fantastic. The other track was on standards of quality for family support and strengthening programs. I heard great things about all of them, and we had a really good group gathered. So thanks to everyone who participated. If you missed it, or even if you were there and just didn't get to go to all the breakout sessions you wanted to, we talked about possibly using some of our webinar slots next year to have people present the content that they shared at the conference. So keep an eye out for that. If that is you and you did present at the conference and you want to get on that webinar schedule, let me know, but I'll be reaching out soon too. And the other thing I'll say is we've decided to do this as an every other year conference. Co-hosted with the National Family Support Network and CSSP and a local host agency. So in this case, it was the Greater Cleveland Network for Family Support, Family Strengthening Network. And we are figuring out the location and co-host, local host for the next one, but it will be in October 2020. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Think about that as you plan your travel budgets and professional development budgets. We'd love to see this conference get even bigger and stronger. So thanks to everyone who participated in the first one. Another big announcement from CSSP, you may have noticed we relaunched our website a little over a week ago with a brand new look. It's fresh, it's modern, it looks great. I'm going to show you where you can find the Strengthening Families materials. It is still a little bit of a work in progress. So I'm actually going to go to the web so that you can see. This is the front page about CSSP in general, and I think you may learn about other projects that we have there. If you're mostly familiar with us through Strengthening Families, you might want to click on some of those other links. But to get to the Strengthening Families content in particular, we will have strengtheningfamilies.net working again soon. Right now it is not working. So the best way to get to our Strengthening Families page is through our work, and either see all projects and go to Strengthening Families here, or go to the Young Children and Their Families team, which is where we're situated within CSSP. And under projects, you can click on Strengthening Families. So there you'll see these tabs across the top. These are still being populated, so we are missing some of the resources that you're used to finding there, or they're at least not linked here. They will be populating over the coming weeks, so please be patient if you can. If you desperately need something and can't find it, let me know, and I probably can get it to you or make sure that it gets posted. The other thing is that they're not linked here, but a lot of the materials are actually available under our publications and resources. So if you go here, it's a search that you can limit to Strengthening Families project, and right away a list of things will come up, and then you can search it with a keyword. So you can see some of the things I've searched recently, and you will start to find those specific resources you're looking for. And again, like I said, if you can't find something, let me know, and it might be there and just not be showing up in search, or it might be that it still needs to be added. And then before too long, we will have things back in order on the pages where you can link directly to them more thematically. So just so you know, this is our new logo for CSSP. We are keeping the same logo for Strengthening Families. I think they go well together. And if you want to get, since strengtheningfamilies.net is currently not working, you can type in this lovely URL if you like. cssp.org/our-work/project/strengthening-families. But probably easier to just go in and navigate the way that I just showed. Let me know if you have questions about it, or like I said, if you can't find something that you need, I will help you find it or send it to you directly and make sure that it gets on the website before too long. So thanks for your patience on that, and I hope you'll agree that it's a move for the better, even if it's a little bit complicated getting there. Another update, we now have 3 valid tools out in the field for measuring protective factors. So in October, Friends released the Protective Factor Survey 2, or PFS2. That, as you probably have heard along the way, is a revision of the original Protective Factor Survey, which many of you have already been using. So the original Protective Factor Survey is still valid and reliable, still a strong instrument. I know many people will probably want to continue using it, at least for a while, for continuity of data. But the PFS2 is even better. It's looking great. There's a pre-post version as well as a retrospective pre-post version. It is new and improved. It looks great. So take a look at it. Remember, you can continue to use the PFS. It's still a valid and reliable instrument. And of course, we have another tool developed at CSSP for the Quality Improvement Center on Early Childhood about 4 or 5 years ago, called the Parents Assessment of Protective Factors, or the PAPF. That is also a valid and reliable tool. So I just encourage you to compare and contrast and see which one works for you for a given audience that you're trying to work with and want to measure their own self-reported protective factors. But it's nice to know that we've got a lot of options. And let me know if you have questions about that. We will probably also try to do a webinar before too long, kind of with an overview of the PFS2, as well as keeping you up to date on what's going on with the other tools. Another CSSP update. We have a set of case studies that was just released that I know some of you will find interesting. Early Childhood Data in Action, Stories from the Field. This is a joint project we did with our partners at NICHQ, the National Institute for Children's Health Quality. And it includes 3 case studies about intentional and meaningful use of data in early childhood systems. And if you are at all interested in that, I encourage you to check it out. The case studies are really engaging from 3 very different places: the city of Philadelphia, Ventura County, California, and Indianola, Mississippi. So lots of diversity in the type of community they're working in, the urban to rural, and hopefully there's a lot to be learned from those that you can apply to your own work. Also just wanted to give another reminder. We mentioned this on last month's webinar, but the deadline is coming up on Monday to nominate someone for a Children's Bureau Champion Award. These awards will be given at the National Conference on Child Abuse and Neglect next April, And it's a nice way to recognize a person, a group, an organization, or an agency that has really been a champion for children in these 5 categories that are listed on the screen. And those are also the themes of the conference coming up in April. So hope you will consider nominating someone. And it's not too big a process. If you still wanted to do it before Monday, you could pull that off. So thank you. All right, those are all the updates. And now I want to introduce my colleague, Anna Lovejoy, who leads CSSP's work on the National Center on Parent, Family, and Community Engagement. She is a senior associate at CSSP and has been involved in the Strengthening Families work for many years, as so many of us have been. And I'm excited that she's carrying this work forward in the Head Start Parent, Family, and Community Engagement Framework and applying it to broader other programs and systems. So Anna, I welcome you to tell us about this exciting new development.
Thanks, Kaylin. Hi, everybody. It's always great to be with the Strengthening Families community. And just appreciate the opportunity today to share some of the work that I've been working on for the last couple of years here at CSSP. So you can advance the next slide. There I am. You can go to the next slide now. So just real quickly, what I wanted to hopefully accomplish with you today are a couple of things. One, just to a very quick review of the research base on family engagement that informs the Parent, Family, and Community Engagement Framework. We'll talk about some of the recent adaptations that we've made to the Head Start PFCE framework, as we call it, for programs and systems. Hopefully we'll have time for a little bit of thinking together about connections with the Strengthening Families framework. And discuss how the PFCE framework can inform efforts to promote family engagement and achieve good outcomes both for children and families in your state. So we can go ahead on to the next slide. Just a little bit of context. So as Kaylin said, I am her colleague. I am full-time employed at the Center for the Study of Social Policy, and we are one of the national consortium partners involved in the National Center on Parent, Family, and Community Engagement. Now, this particular national center is one of several that's funded through the Office of Head Start and the Office of Child Care at the Education for Children and Families. And it's part of an effort to bring greater cohesion and consistency to Head Start, early Head Start, and child care and other areas of the early care and education field. So we're happy to be part of it. You can move on to the next slide. So we are, again, one of the 4 partners that comprise the National Center on Parent, Family, and Community Engagement. The lead partner is Brazelton Touchpoint Center up at Boston Children's Hospital. And we also partner with Child Care Aware of America and Child Trends. Next slide. So I think now we wanted to break. We have 2 poll questions. The first is we wanted to get a sense for how familiar you might already be with the Head Start Parent, Family, and Community Engagement Framework. So go ahead and select one of the options. Is I know it, I love it, I live it. I have a general understanding but don't reference it regularly. Familiar with it, but I need to better absorb its content. And what is a PFCE? So if you could do that, and then whenever Kaylin is ready to share the results, then we can talk about those.
Yeah, we've got votes are still rolling in. We're at 70%. So give people a few more seconds.
I should have mentioned that the original Head Start Parent, Family, and Community Engagement Framework did come out several years ago at this point. And I'm going to talk about in a little bit what's kind of new and improved with that, and then talk about the broader system level of the framework as well.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. 78% of people voted. And I think this will let me share the results. Yep. So there you can see them.
Sounds good. All right. So we're pretty evenly spread. Some are familiar. Some know it really well. Some never heard it before. So that's helpful to know. So I'll just keep going. But if you have any questions that pop up along the way, please feel free to use the chat box to ask your questions, and we'll figure out a way to address them either as I'm talking, or we'll also hopefully have time for Q&A at the end. So then I think we also had a second poll that I don't think I had a slide for, but if you wanted to pull that one up, the next poll. Right, so what framework is your state currently using to promote family engagement in early care and education? So for example, your state could be using Strengthening Families. You could already be using the Head Start framework. You could use some combination thereof. You may have developed your own framework, or maybe your state isn't using a framework to promote family engagement. So go ahead and select the one that best fits your state situation, and we'll see what we find out.
All right, we've got votes coming in. I will add we were unable to include the option of I'm not sure, which might be the response that some of you would give, so you don't have to answer if you're not sure. So we might not get as high a response rate on this one. But so far we're at 38%. A few more of you can probably chime in here. Maybe that's everyone who knows. So I will close the poll and share the results.
Okay, so looks like Strengthening Families or some combination thereof, and then a few of you have developed your own. Okay, well, great. That's helpful, and really, I'm always looking for opportunities to learn more about what states are doing. So, just encourage you to be in touch with us at CSSP as things develop in your states and you have things that you want to share about family engagement. We're all ears. So, so now I wanted to just kind of start off, reminding people about, obviously we're all here because, family engagement and strengthening families in particular is important to us, because we know it's an important part of high quality services. It's important to child outcomes and to getting to the outcomes for families and children that we want. And so I wanted to just give a little bit of background on the Parent, Family, and Community Engagement Framework, and then we'll go kind of deeper into the weeds on it in a little bit. So this circle that you're seeing on your screen right now is the Gifties Framework for Early Childhood Systems. For those of you that are familiar with the Head Start, the original Head Start framework, you'll see that the rectangle in the middle should seem fairly familiar to you. It does have most of the same components. There have been a few tweaks, and I'm going to talk about those in a minute. And then you'll see there are two sort of outer circles. One speaks to the different elements of or components of an early childhood system that really drive and impact what happens on the ground in programs and communities. And then the outer circle is just stating very clearly and explicitly that equity, inclusiveness, and cultural and linguistic responsiveness are central and core to everything that that we do in talking about family engagement. So I wanted to, next I think we're going to turn to just briefly touch on the research base. Many of you may be familiar with this already, but we can go to the next slide. These are just a few of the research studies that we drew on to inform the original framework, and then also drew on some more recent research to kind of refresh that as well. But basically, what we know is that family engagement plays a major role in children's school readiness. It impacts their social, emotional, and academic competencies, and that these effects have been found all the way through K-12 and even beyond. We know that family engagement also improves the child-teacher relationship and helps smooth child and family transitions to kindergarten. We know that those are really important pieces of school readiness. We know that families who are active and respected participants can help providers see new ways to build safe, welcoming, and trusting environments. And we know that mutual trust helps providers themselves feel more confident and open with parents, especially when discussing concerns about a child's development or behavior. The research also suggests that parents' perceptions of teacher responsiveness are an important dimension of parent-school relationships and correlate with the frequency of parental involvement in the program. We also know, and this I think is particularly reflected in the PFCE framework, is that the organizational context of early childhood programs is really important for establishing those quality family partnerships that lead to positive child outcomes. When they're high-quality family partnership practices are best achieved when program leaders model those reciprocal professional caring relationships and share power within the entire organization with staff and parents. And then finally, we know that establishing relational trust and focusing on accountability across systems of care are shown to improve partnerships with families and promote progress toward addressing systemic challenges. So I hope that this, this is a helpful sort of bit of reference to the research that helps all of us make the case to others in the field and to others who impact what happens in our field, to make the case for why family engagement should really be central to every conversation and decision, that gets made, because it really is important. You're not going to get to those child outcomes that you want to see without being in full partnership and relationship with families. So we can go to the next slide. So there are a couple of reasons why we took the original Head Start PFCE framework and revised it and adapted it. One is that since the original Head Start framework has been rolled out to the field and Head Start programs and early Head Start programs have had experience actually implementing it, using it, living and breathing it with their families, I think there have been some lessons learned and some new ahas coming out of what we're hearing. And so part of this was a recognition of some places where we could tweak a few things about the original framework to make it more clear, to be more consistent with the research, and to reflect what we know is effective practice on the ground in programs. There also to reflect some of the new research that has been coming out and continues to come out that inform our constructs about family engagement. I wanted to take a moment just to sort of refresh everyone's memories or introduce, if this is new for you, our definition of family engagement. And I think you'll hear, somewhat similar language and concepts to, how we think about parents in the context of strengthening families. But under the PFCE framework, we define family engagement as an interactive process through which program staff and families and other family members and their children all join together to build positive and goal-oriented relationships. It's a shared responsibility of families and professionals. It requires mutual respect for the roles and strengths that each has to offer. Family engagement means doing with and not doing to or for families. So at the program level, it really means involving parents' engagement with their children and with staff as they work together toward the goals that families choose for themselves and their children. Right, so we're again, we're not telling families what to do. We are walking beside families as they choose their goals for their children and themselves. Program staff work together with families and other professionals and community partners in ways that promote equity, inclusiveness, and cultural and linguistic responsiveness. Again, that was something I mentioned earlier, and is a newly explicit element of or piece of the framework. I also wanted to share our definition of community engagement, which refers to the mutually respectful and strength-based interactions of program staff and families with community members and agencies at all levels. These partnerships are effective in supporting parents' roles as valued community members and supports their progress towards their goals for themselves and their children again. Community partners can provide tangible child development supports and resources that families and staff want and need. They can work with families and early care and education programs toward the goals, such as parents' own educational achievement, economic mobility, and other aspects of family well-being. Program staff actively seek out and respond to community voices, strengths, and needs, and collaborate with families and community members and other agencies to identify common goals, align resources, and share data for continuous improvement and effective partnerships. So that's, you know, our vision and our definition for what we see as community engagement. So many of you may also know one of the another reason for sort of revisiting the Head Start framework is the Head Start program performance standards have been revised in the last couple of years, and there are now very explicit requirements that programs must implement and engage families in family goal setting process in which they identify family strengths and needs, and specifically related to the family engagement outcomes that are identified in the Parent, Family, and Community Engagement Framework. And I'm going to talk about what those are in just a minute. And so, you know, this is particularly for Head Start and Early Head Start programs, this is a really important hook for why they are paying attention to family engagement, and hopefully our framework is helpful for them in terms of setting goals for how they're going to meet these program standards. We can go to the next slide, please. So again, this is the framework again. The other point that I wanted to make before we're going to next zoom into that program level, and I'm going to just walk through some of the key parts of the framework so you have a better understanding of what it is and what it encompasses. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we think about parent, family, and community engagement in ways that are go beyond just the one-time sort of one-off activities to involve parents in the life of a program. For example, parent-teacher conferences or back-to-school nights. Those are all really important activities, and they're part of how we do involve families and start to build those relationships. But really what we hope to see, and that what we hope that the Parent, Family, Community Engagement Framework can help to achieve is family engagement that is systemic, so that all staff in a program have a role to play in promoting family engagement. It means that individuals understand the roles that they and others in their program play across systems and services, and they see how these roles work together to promote the vision of family engagement that they share. So as we like to say at our national center, that PFCE is family engagement is everyone's business, and we all understand how we all play a role to do that. Another aspect is that it's integrated, so it's across all parts of a program that work together to achieve those results. So everyone in, for example, a Head Start and an Early Head Start program coordinates and reinforces each other's efforts in order to maximize their impact. So staff coordinate within and across their different roles and the services they provide. And they also coordinate with community partners to help families access community activities and services and to provide seamless experiences for families. And then the third aspect of sort of our vision for parent, family, and community engagement is that it be comprehensive, so that program services are designed for holistic staff responses. It means that staff and providers consider the full range of strengths, interests, and needs of each child and family. And then staff can connect families with all of the available services and resources that they need to achieve their goals. So a comprehensive response increases the likelihood that progress in one area will reinforce progress in other areas. So again, if you want to get really acronymy, we say PFCE is SIC, or Systemic, Integrated, and Comprehensive. But I promise to never use that acronym again. Okay, we can go on to the next slide, please. So this is the program level framework that is what Head Start and Early Head Start programs are encouraged to focus on in terms of how they're going to set goals for meeting the program performance standards. If you're not as familiar with the program level framework, we like to think about it in terms of a theory of change, and that I'll sort of walk you through that in a minute. But I think actually let's go to the next slide. What I want to start with first is the most important aspect of the framework, and sort of the core foundation of it really is the notion that we're not going to get anywhere with families and children unless we're building these positive relationships that are really developed over time, and not just because we want to be in relationship with families, but because we want to support them in achieving the goals that they set for themselves and their children, so they're goal-oriented relationships. And then, of course, equity, inclusiveness, cultural and linguistic responsiveness are at the heart of those relationships, right? And so these are all really important aspects of how we as those in the field engage with families. We know these relationships are fueled by families' passion for their children. That's what they're bringing to the relationship. They're trusting us as providers with the most important people in their lives, right? We know that the relationships we have are based on mutual respect and trust. It's important that we affirm and celebrate families' cultures and languages. It's also reliant upon providing opportunities for two-way communication that include authentic interactions that are meaningful to those who participate in them, and often require an awareness of one's personal biases and how those biases can affect mutual respect and trust. So that's another important aspect of relationship building. We can go to the next slide, please. So like I said, we think about the framework as a theory of change, and so we want to start with the end in mind. And the end in mind that we care about the most, of course, are the child's outcomes. So this is one of the things that we have tweaked in the program level part of the framework, just to be much more clear and specific about what outcomes we actually want to see. So we've sort of added and expanded on what's in this purple column of the framework, and also just to point out that that these aspects, safe, healthy, and well, learning and developing, etc., all also align to the Head Start Early Learning Outcomes framework. So again, trying to provide more sort of consistency and alignment to what we're asking Head Start Early Head Start programs to do, but also to encourage more consistency across the entire early care and education field, so to the extent that Head Start can inform what's going on in programs all around the country. We hope that this will help to help programs to do that. So let's see. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Thank you. So the family outcomes are the blue column of the program level part of the framework. These are really the heart and soul, or the center of it. These have not changed at all in terms of their wording or their definition. These are the things that if we as programs, as providers, as professionals are able to help achieve with families, then we will be more successful in achieving those child outcomes. So I'm not going to give the definitions for all of them. There are 7 of them. If you, I'll refer you to the core documents that are available that provide the full definition. But just to be clear that, we're talking about achieving family well-being, building positive parent-child relationships, supporting families as lifelong educators, families as learners themselves, thinking about family engagement in transitions, families' connections to peers and community, and families as advocates and leaders. And so those of you familiar with strengthening families will see, a pretty high degree of alignment, I think, between these outcomes and the protective factors. Although they're, we consider it as sort of just a different way to sort of shift the prism of, explaining what we mean by, strengthening families, by protective factors, by the family outcomes that we know are so important. So I think we can move on to the next slide, please. So the next two parts of the framework, the program impact areas, that sort of pink salmonish color column, and then the program foundations, are both part of the systemic approach that this framework takes. So it's pointing to the service areas and activities in a program that have the greatest influence on family outcomes. So when you think about the program environment, family partnerships, teaching and learning, community partnerships, and then access and continuity, which is a new aspect or a new impact area that has been added to the framework. Again, because we know from the research how important, access to high-quality experiences are, particularly when they are continuous and there is no, churning or break in a child's participation. And also, this is also a nod to the new requirements in the Child Care and Development Block Grant Act of 2014 and the ensuing final rule that states are responsible for responding to related to increasing or ensuring families' access and continuity to child care. Let's go to the next slide. So then the program foundations are sort of those fundamental aspects of a program that drive everything and impact everything that happens in the program. So it's important for program leaders to be aware of and knowledgeable about how they in their role can be promoting family engagement and the kinds of systemic policies and decisions that impact what other staff in the program can do and should do. Professional development, obviously, making sure that staff and providers have the knowledge and skills and competencies that are necessary to build those trusting and goal-oriented relationships. And of course, continuous learning and quality improvement processes that encourage programs to constantly be asking, what are we doing, how are we doing it, how can we do it better, what results are we getting, is also an important part of that. So we can go to the next slide. So I just wanted to point out, like the PFCE framework, the Strengthening Families Protective Factors framework is also a theory of change, right? And we have in our sort of logic model here showing how the everyday actions that that occur and that staff and providers can take in programs every day, effectively build or help families to build the protective factors that we know get to those key outcomes that we want to see through strengthened families, optimal child development, and reduced likelihood of child abuse and neglect. So, I wish I could put both frameworks up on the screen, but as Caitlin likes to say, that would probably look too much like a frame wreck. But, I just wanted to just take a brief moment just to show that, again, though they sort of present the logic in slightly different ways, and maybe speak to, for example, the PFCE framework, I think, is a little more explicit about those sort of systemic aspects of a program, the, program foundations and impact areas. both frameworks are really helping to inform what happens in programs and in order to get to those outcomes that we want. So I hope that's at least a little bit helpful in sort of understanding how these two there may be two different ways of approaching getting to the same outcome. So we can turn the page or go to the next slide. So again, back to the big picture of the framework. We, in recognition of the need and the desire to bring more consistency and a common vision to the entire field, not just for Head Start and Early Head Start, but all early care and education settings. The Office of Head Start and Child Care really wanted to add or adapt what had been developed more specifically for the program level to think about what are the system components of, for example, a state's early childhood system that also impact what happens on the ground in programs. And so we went through a process of engaging multiple stakeholders who have been thinking about and working with states in early childhood systems building for a long time. We consulted the literature and looked at different conceptual frameworks that were already in use. For example, the Early Childhood System Working Group and their early childhood oval diagram, if any of you are familiar with that calls out the interconnected intersection between early care and education, health, and family support. And we also went directly to state child care administrators and other state level agency leaders to ask them, what are those important drivers. And so this is what we came up with, that inner ring, which calls out things like leadership and governance, infrastructure and funding, policies, regulations, and standards. All of those things that again, drive what or can impact what happens on the ground in programs. And so again, it would take us well past the hour if I were to go into the definitions of each of these. But hopefully, even just looking at them helps you to think how we, consider this in a very systemic, integrated, and comprehensive way, right? So that we're not just talking about passing, a new set of quality standards, for example, that speak to family engagement. That's an important part, but there are other things and other roles and other actions that can be taken, in different levels of a state system to help really, I think, spread that notion of systemic, integrated, and comprehensive family engagement. I did want to point out, and actually we can go to the next slide, thinking back to strengthening families itself as a logic model, and so this is actually the overall logic model. So that inner ring of the PFCE framework somewhat aligns to, I think, or echoes, those core functions that CSSP has identified in its work with supporting all of you at the in states implementing strengthening families, but those core functions that really support integration and implementation of strengthening families. So building parent partnerships, deepening knowledge and understanding, shifting practice, policy, and systems, and ensuring accountability. Again, it's, we're maybe slicing and dicing it in slightly different ways, but what we're talking about are those opportunities to really impact what happens in programs and with professionals to get to those outcomes. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, we're still doing okay on time as well. So I just wanted to call your attention to a few things that some resources that our National Center has produced in the last year, and a few that are coming very soon. I wanted to make you aware of them, that they were designed specifically to support implementation and use of the PFCE framework, but I think actually at the end, they also are really speak universally to any approach that you want to take, whether you're using strengthening families or have created a different approach or using a different framework for your family engagement effort. I think you can. There's a lot of value in these, and they probably are relevant and useful to your work. So even if you're not, using the PFCE framework, I would encourage you to, take a look at these if you're interested in ideas for how you can strengthen your early childhood system and prioritizing family engagement. And as all of these resources are introduced to the field, and hopefully states will pick them up and use them, we're going to be really curious to hear how they are being used, whether they are indeed applicable to any state, regardless of what framework you're using, and even what additional tools and resources we as our national centers can develop to continue to help advance your efforts. We can go. Oh no, we're already on the slide. Okay. So the first one I wanted to point out are the relationship-based competencies. Some of you may be familiar with the relationship-based competencies for Head Start and Early Head Start that came out several years ago. And those were originally developed to clarify what the family service professionals in Head Start and Early Head Start programs needed to know and be able to do in order to build a positive goal-oriented relationships with families and children. So a couple of years ago, our National Center undertook an effort to revisit and revise the relationship-based competencies so that they reflect the most current research. They use simpler language. They now include a new competency on leadership and advocacy. And I think what's most exciting, at least from my perspective for the field, is that it specifies competencies for multiple roles. Since it's important for all staff, not just, at least in Head Start and Early Head Start, not just the family service staff, but teachers and program directors as well, to understand and practice relationship-based competencies in their everyday work with families. So they are broken out for supervisors of each role, but also for the professionals. So one thing I wanted to note is that we cross-reference the competencies in related fields as we develop these revised competencies. So including early care and education, but also infant mental health, social work, maternal and child health, pediatrics, and psychology. So now we have basically a suite of competencies. There's one document that is sort of the overarching one that sets the stage for and lays out what everybody would, regardless of your role in the field, what everybody should know and be able to do in terms of building relationships with families. And then we have these more role-specific resources that specify for those who work with families, so caseworkers, family support workers, those who work with children in group settings. So these are your child care teachers, your pre-K teachers, those who interact directly with children, and then those who make home visits. So we have a set for home visitors. So these are really applicable for Head Start, Early Head Start staff and directors, child care directors, managers, parent leaders too in programs. They can also be used by and for training and technical assistance providers, state child care administrators, state level professionals, and direct child serving practitioners, all to get a really clear understanding of what we mean by these, what it takes to build relationships with families. The other thing I wanted to mention is that, we can go to the next slide. In addition to just the set of competencies that we have, We also have assessments for both the supervisory role and the staff role for each of these. So that can be used to assess progress in the various competencies and to identify areas for professional growth. So I think these are really exciting because they're very concrete and very specific, and we hope that they'll be useful to programs. They can obviously be used to inform individual professionals. Directors and managers can use them to plan professional development opportunities for staff as a whole, and inform opportunities for reflective practice and coaching. And at the state, district, and sort of other jurisdictional levels, the relationship-based competencies can be used to, for example, develop strategic plans to enhance early childhood workforce development, or to inform new partnerships or strengthen existing partnerships with colleges and universities to support the inclusion of family engagement in educational opportunities, or to help make decisions about the use of existing resources to promote family engagement. So, we really hope, and these were intentionally designed to be useful and applicable to, no matter what role you play in the field, we think there's something of value. So we hope that folks will check them out. We can go to the next slide. Almost done. Just a few more things I wanted to point out. So you may know that states and territories right now are working to meet the new requirements in the CCDBG Act and the final rule related to consumer education, and which really is an intent to undergo activities and provide information so that parents can access the information that they need in order to make informed childcare choices, and to strengthen requirements to protect the health and safety of children in care. Several of the TA centers in the national TA system collaborated to develop a series of resources to support state implementation of the consumer education requirements. And in particular, I wanted to highlight a couple that our national center was very involved in developing. One is an orientation on consumer engagement that introduces a vision for engaging families as consumers of early childhood and school-age care, and explains how this vision relates to family engagement as well. Administrators, professionals, and others can use the information in that guide to make their systems more responsive to parents and families. We also have one of the big pieces of the Child Care Development Block Grant requirements are the creation of a consumer education website, and we developed a guide to creating websites that create a family-friendly experience. So it offers research-based information that agencies and organizations can use to create or enhance family-friendly consumer education websites. There's also a assessment tool that can be used to address or to enhance your state's consumer education website, to see what you have, to offer ideas for what you can what you might want to improve upon, things like that. So those are some tools available, and we encourage you to take a look at those as well. And then finally, you can go to the next slide. This is a forthcoming resource. It hopefully will be out soon. But our colleagues at Child Trends went through a very rigorous process to identify a set of 8 research-based family engagement quality indicators, and identified examples of related program and professional practices to offer states ideas for how they can incorporate family engagement into, for example, their quality rating and improvement systems, into their technical assistance offerings and their quality assurance systems. So we hope that this guide will offer ideas for what family engagement looks like in a program, and also ideas for the policies and systems changes that states can pursue in order to promote and achieve the change in practice that is so important to building those relationships with families. We hope that, for example, the key indicators will be useful at basically any stage of a development of a quality rating and improvement system. As states are either developing or revising their indicators and standards, or developing their quality improvement processes as well. So we'll be excited to share the news of that when this resource is available as well. All right, so we have just a few minutes left. It was a lot to go through, and I feel terrible for just talking at you for so long, but I'm glad we have at least a couple of minutes for anyone to share their thoughts, feedback, or questions. I would love to hear from folks about how the PFCE framework and the resources I just shared might align with what your state is already doing, or anything that jumps out at you as something that you thought, oh well, we could really use that in our state. I'm going to go look for it. So I don't know, Kaylin, if anyone has submitted questions along the way.
So far, the only question that we've received was someone who didn't, sorry, I'm just trying to get to where I can read it. Someone who didn't get to respond to the poll question. She said Maryland developed its own framework using Head Start as a model. So I don't know if other states have that experience as well, of kind of building off of the Head Start model or framework. Other than that, we haven't gotten any questions typed in. If anyone would like to, you can go ahead and type it. We can read it aloud, or you can raise your hand and I can unmute you if you're in a place where that will work. Not seeing anything so far, and I know we are right up to the end of our time. So I want to thank you, Anna. If someone does still type something in, we can still try to get to it, and we can certainly respond by email if you type in a question that we don't get time to answer. But Anna, thank you so much for sharing this and for all the hard work that you've been doing. Just putting the contact information up so folks can see that. And I hope that you will all seek out those resources that Anna shared and find them useful. Let us know if you've got questions about how this connects with Strengthening Families, or if you have questions about the Parent-Family Community Engagement Framework itself. You can reach out to Anna as well. Excuse me. I'll also put our personal emails up here. That is my address as well as Anna's, and then Martha Reeder from the Alliance of Children's Trust Funds, while they weren't able to join us today, are partners in these webinars. So I think we might wrap it up there since I don't see other questions coming in. If someone's frantically typing, we will still see that afterwards, but I think we can wrap up for today. Thank you so much, Anna. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we will talk to you again next month. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks so much, Caitlin. We appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.